Welcome back to another youth-centered podcast. It's Saturday morning. We are in week 6 of this pandemic, and obviously the new normal here at the Youth Center. We continue to obviously be closed to the public and to our kids, but we're continuing to try to do a lot of things throughout the community, and you can follow all of the great things we're doing on all of our social media. So today I got a special guest. It's always great to have a guest that actually grew up in North Andover, and in this case grew up with coming to the youth center and everything else. So we have the one, the only, he has become a bit of a legend here in North Andover, Sam Murray. Welcome, Sam, to the podcast.
Rick, thank you for having me on. It's good to be on the other end of the interview spectrum in a sense, because I'm used to interviewing people, so this is a little bit of unfamiliar territory in a sense.
Yeah, and if people don't know, Sam's going to give a complete bio, but the most latest thing that North Andover will know is Sam is literally the entire sports department at the NATV. You will see him with all of our sports teams, boys and girls, basketball, football, baseball, whatever it is, conducting interviews. I was at a bunch of basketball games this year, and he's actually behind the mic doing the play-by-play, and then he's obviously doing interviews after the game. He's an amazing one-man show, but he is a lot more, and actually his job is full-time not at NATV, so we're going to get into that a little bit. But Sam, for people that may not know the legend Sam Murray, let's give me a little bio from you being that young kid up through high school, college, and beyond.
So I grew up here in the great town of North Andover. My mom is a townie. She grew up here. My grandfather's a townie. So really, North Andover is rooted in the blood. But I went to the high school here. I came to the youth center here as well. It's good to be in some familiar territory in a sense. The basketball court behind me and everything. And yeah, I played sports in high school. Had a lot of friends here, and went to the University of Rhode Island afterwards, and got involved with the college radio station there, which was great. Did that 4 years, became the sports director there. Got to witness the University of Rhode Island Rams go to the NCAA tournament twice, and I got to travel with them, so that was really cool. And, since then, I work at NBC Sports Boston as a video editor. So a lot of the highlights you see on their original programming, whether it's Early Edition or Boston Sports Tonight, I have a hand in that, so it's cool to see kind of the fruits of your labor on TV. And like you said, I'm also at North Andover CAM doing the sports, for them. And it's not a one-man department. I can't give myself all the credit. Bill Robert, who is the operations director there, he's been great, and he helps me with a lot of stuff as well. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's kind of me.
Yeah, so we got to know Sam as a middle school kid and his crew. We'll talk a little bit about his infamous crew shortly. And then obviously I saw him grow up and graduate high school. And in typical, I tend to lose sight a little bit of kids when they go off to college if they're not either working for us in the summer or whatever. And then I started to pick up information that this guy, Sam Murray, was actually doing a lot for the URI Rams program and their sports program. So, Sam, let's talk a little bit about that. Mm-hmm. Like, how did it start? What did you actually do? And how rewarding was that in terms of getting experience to what you hopefully will continue to do?
So obviously I went to URI in the fall of 2014. I was still a little shy kid. I mean, I had a lot of friends here, and I was really, social here. But when you go to college and you're by yourself, because I was one of 2 people from my high school to go to URI, at least for my class, it was tough kind of branching out. And I really had to take a leap of faith going up to the college radio station, WRIU, which is 90.3 FM down there. And going up to them on one of those first night things and introducing myself. And it took a lot of courage, and it was tough to do that because I wasn't used to having to do that for a while, at least with making new acquaintances. But I got involved right away. I did a couple of broadcasts. My first broadcast was actually a women's hockey game, and I was the color commentator for that, so that was fun doing that. And then I branched off. I did football, men's soccer, men's basketball, women's basketball, men's hockey. And then I kind of, as the more I got my feet wet, the more I became ingrained with them, and I became the sports director for them my sophomore year of college.
Wow.
And it was really fast-tracked. I guess they really liked me a lot.
Sure.
But, so I really got more involved with it as I went on. Got to travel with the team. I went to Brooklyn, Pittsburgh, Sacramento, California for them when they were I happened to get lucky.
Was that the basketball team?
Yeah, that was the basketball
Wow.
team. I happened to got lucky that they were really good, probably the best they've ever been.
Now,
for that program.
Danny Hurley's the coach at that point?
Yes, no, Danny Hurley was the coach.
Okay.
And he actually left for UConn my senior year. So right after that, he left. So kind of a sore spot for URI fans.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, he's a great coach. Give us a Danny Hurley nugget. You were around with him. You flew on planes with him. You were around the practice thing. Give us something about Danny Hurley that maybe the average person doesn't know.
The average person doesn't know. He really is a player's type of coach. When you see him on TV, he's kind of like all business. You know, he gets angry. He's famous for like stomping his foot a lot. But I think that's more of an act than his actual personality. Every time I interact with him, which was a handful of times, but he was great. He was really respectful with the media. Really, I just think what you see on TV is not him.
Right.
And you know, he was great. And I loved being around him, and I loved covering him.
So what was your major at URI, and did you like URI in general? Forget the sports piece. Did you like the school, the academics there?
Yeah, so I was a journalism major. Not a lot of people go into that nowadays, at least personally. But I enjoyed it. I loved the department chair, John Pantalone there. He was great. He was a great professor. The classes were great. And I think the thing that URI started to embrace, at least when I was there, was they started to embrace of don't just be in the classroom, volunteer for other organizations. So they encouraged outside of the classroom activities, which I thought was really great. And I think for people who want to go into journalism, whether that's sports or news, it's important to get involved in other areas that's not just in the learning environment.
Absolutely. You graduate from URI, and if I'm correct, you came home to North Andover, and
did,
you still reside in North Andover.
I do, at least for another month, and then I'm moving to Medford with a couple buddies.
Good for you. Good for you. All right, take me through graduation. You get that diploma, and now it's like, okay, it's the real work field. How hard was it getting some work, and was NBC Boston something you jumped in right away with?
So it was a couple months before I went to NBC Sports Boston. I graduated in May, and then I didn't start working for them until October. So it was a lot of, looking on job sites every day, seeing if there was a new posting, kind of like having to ask people, like, do you know anyone? Like, have you heard anything? And kind of doing that. And I had 2 jobs before I ended up working at NBC Sports Boston. One of them was installing lab furniture for my friend's company, so I had to get up at 4:30 in the morning every day, which I wasn't used to.
Sure.
So that was kind of a tough adjustment. And then I worked at J&M on Main Street as a pizza delivery driver.
Wow.
Before I got the job. But working in sports, or at least breaking into it, is tough because you kind of have to. You either have to be incredibly good at what you do to the point where people know who you are, or you kind of just have to get lucky. And I think I got lucky because I saw a job posted at NBC Sports Boston. I applied for it thinking, what the heck? And it turned out that I actually, caught the eye of someone. So it was kind of a lucky situation in terms of that, but it's tough breaking into it. It really is. You kind of do have to know someone in a sense.
So you've been at NBC Boston for how long now?
About a year and a half now. I think it is like a year and 6 months.
Okay. So break it down for me a little bit. And I'm sure as a new person in the field at NBC Boston, that you got to do a little bit of everything. So tell me what actually you're doing for NBC Boston.
Yeah, so I'm a video editor. So basically that is taking footage from game footage from basically all the sports, primarily basketball, football, baseball, and hockey, and a little bit of soccer here and there, and condensing it into 45 seconds to a minute highlights that appear on TV. So NBC Sports Boston at least has 2 shows that they do primarily, which is Early Edition and Boston Sports Tonight. And essentially the producer will ask for, can you give me, clips of good Tom Brady, for example? And you go through all the game footage that's in the system, and you put together 45 seconds to a minute highlight of that. So primarily that's my job.
So what's an average day for you? So let's talk prior to the pandemic, because I do want to get like what's your life now since you've been dealing with the pandemic. But before the pandemic, give me an average day. What time do you go in? Are you there all day? What time do you go home? What's the whole deal with that?
So primarily I get there at 2:30 in the afternoon. So I am a second shift worker in a sense, which I'm fine with because I'm more of a night owl anyways. But I get there at 2:30. The producers typically start laying stuff out around like 3 o'clock, something like that. And from 3 until 11 o'clock at night, I'm working with video and I'm putting stuff together.
What time do you clock out?
11 o'clock.
11 o'clock.
Yeah, so their programming runs from 6 to 11.
Okay.
So primarily from then is when I'm the busiest.
Okay, offline, you talked to us a little bit that obviously the world's changed for all of us, right? So tell me about what your relationship working with NABC right now in terms of the pandemic. Are you working less hours? And I think you're branching out in some other things, correct?
Correct, yeah. So I think with everyone, we're operating at a reduced capacity in a sense with everything going on, with everything shut down. And that's me as well. I've cut back to a couple days a week. And it's not in sports, unfortunately, which is my passion, but I'm working on the news side of things too. So for NBC 10 Boston, I'm putting together clips for their news coverage with all of this, because I think with the coronavirus and the 24/7 sense of everyone needs to know what's going on, there's more of a need for news people, and that's where I happen to branch out in a little bit. And it's been good because it's been giving me somewhat of a paycheck for the past 4 or 5 weeks, I think, is when really it's really kicked into that.
And have you been going into the studio? You're doing a lot of work from home.
I do go into the studio, but I'm wearing a mask at all times except for when I'm at my desk, because I'm the only person there. Everyone else is working from home because they've worked there for a while, so they kind of get that luxury in a sense. But I don't mind it because I feel safe in the building. It's a skeleton crew compared to what it usually is. And yeah, basically I'm going into work 2-3 days a week and obviously seeing what's going on there.
So obviously having a global pandemic is not anything that any of us wanted, and it's obviously a horrible, horrible thing. But there are obviously, I try to look at things on the positive to a certain degree, and this has allowed you to branch outside. I know sports is your passion, but hey, getting more experience of even doing stuff outside of sports is great, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think for the media business, you want to do everything you can, or everything that's offered to you, so you really can, have a wide net to cast out, and then eventually you find something you like and you do it. So that's my philosophy, is that I try to do everything that is offered for me, so I can one day find that that one thing to hold on to.
So let's talk a little about NACAM. I think you're doing a phenomenal job.
Thank you.
Obviously, this is stuff you're doing in your personal time. It's not something you get paid for. But, NACAM, I think, has had some times where they have had great sports coverage, and I think there's times where there's been no sports coverage. So you've kind of brought your own niche. It sounds to me like Brian and the crew down there have kind of given you a little carte blanche to do a number of different things. So explain to me how it got involved with NACAM, and how's it going for you? Tell me some of the programs you're running down there, and give us a little bit of the day in the life of you working for NACAM.
Yeah, of course. So it's a funny story. I actually got introduced to North Andover Cam when I was working at J&M as a delivery driver, and one of the people there happened to order some food. So I go there, obviously with the food, and at the time I kind of heard about it, but I didn't really know much about North Andover Cam. And I asked, I'm like, can I get involved? Is there, stuff to do for me? And I laid out my interest, and they're like, absolutely. And I got basically involved right away. And I started doing some football games there, filming the games, and then doing some post-game stuff, whether that was interviewing people. My good friend Casey Walsh, who's a really big North Andover townie,
Sure.
He was a coach at the time, so he started getting me access with the players and the coaches. And now I built up a good relationship with the head coach, John Dobzinski there. He's been great. But, and then I started branching out. When the football season was over, I followed around the basketball team with Coach Paul Tanglis. He was great. And then baseball with Coach Todd Doolin. And then I think it was this year or the fall of 2019, I wanted to make it an initiative of mine to cover all the sports I can. So I started doing, girls volleyball, girls soccer, boys soccer, girls basketball, the two hockeys, and some wrestling. And really my initiative was to cover everything I can. And I made it happen. I think there's 30 varsity sports in North Andover High School, I believe. I've given a feature to at least 20 of those teams.
How many hours a week were you working covering high school sports here in North Andover?
At least 10 hours a week, I think.
Wow.
Whether that's filming games, whether that's working on video packages and stuff like that. I've put a lot of time into it. And I think the amount of time that I put into it has shown.
Well, I mean, just off the record, we were talking. I actually thought that was really your main job. I saw the NBC Boston was more of a part-time gig because I see you so much around town. What has access been like? You mentioned John Dubzinski, but from the athletic department, the coaches, pretty much everybody, I'm hearing love it because obviously it's giving their sports some exposure. How do you think the access has been for you, and is it something that needs to get better, or is it really good access?
I think I'm fortunate that we have such a great athletic department, and it really starts from the youth level as well. With all basically, sports are ingrained in NA culture, in my opinion, at a very young age, and it shows when you get to high school, and you have a bunch of players at least that are respectful, they're courteous. It's ingrained in them, and the athletic department encourages that as well. I think that Laura Habecker has done a great job in her however many years she's been here. I don't know personally because I was in college at the time when she was here or when she got here, but she's done a great job, and it shows in the coaches too. John Dubzinski, Paul Tanglis, Todd Doolin, Lisa Razinen, for example, are some of the coaches. Jess Davini as well have been really approachable and encourage the access, because I think you want your kids to have as much exposure as you can and to highlight what they do on and off the court. And I think the coaches and the athletic department have been great in terms of just allowing me access to tell their stories in a sense.
So tell me about the kids. I see interviews with some of our players, and not just the superstars, but a lot of people that are involved with the program and sports. How have the kids been? Obviously, I would imagine they love getting a little exposure themselves. What's that been like?
The kids have been great. Ever since I started covering them, they always want to talk, which is great. And when they talk, they give great answers, really, and answers I don't expect, high schoolers to give, because I think when you think of a high school athlete, you typically think of like 10 words said per answer and stuff like that, kind of like limited, don't know what to talk about. But in North Andover, they've been an open book, and that's been great. And I think the players here have been excellent ever since I started covering them, just in terms of giving me answers and actually wanting to have a voice.
So NACAM has allowed you to do a lot of different things, and you mentioned Bill helping out a little bit, but a lot of this is totally a one-man show in terms of production and everything else. How has have to actually do this a lot by yourself, how has that made you better at your profession?
I think practice is perfect, and I think the more you do, the better quality work you produce. And I mean, I don't do a lot of the work on my own. Again, I do have a lot of help, but times when they're not available is when I really got to kick it into overdrive and put together the best quality I can. And it kind of stinks for me because I'm kind of a perfectionist in a sense. I want what I do to feel like it's 100% perfect, and that takes a lot of extra time to get it up to that quality. But yeah, all the work I've done, whether that's sports, I've also branched out. I just did a story the other week about businesses in NA being affected by the coronavirus pandemic.
Yeah, I saw that. That was good.
Yeah, thank you. And it took a while to get that together, but once you ultimately put it together, it has to be the best quality work you can. And I think all the stuff I've done and putting it together really has increased my chances and ability to get that coveted job I want in the future.
Now, when did you first think that you wanted to do something in the sports field? Am I wrong to think that you did something in high school? Were you involved with something sports-wise in high school? I get a vision of a picture of you like in a Wizard's outfit or something.
No, actually, I didn't do anything in high school with what I currently do. But I think at a young age, I think it was around 12 or 13, I realized I wasn't going professional in any sports. I still wanted to work in sports, and I figured, well, what can I do? And really, I latched onto that thing of I wanted to be a sports reporter or a sports talk show host, in a sense. So when I went to college, I picked my major, journalism, because I think that was the area where I thought that could get me into it. But yeah, I've always wanted to work in sports ever since I was a young kid, and I think right now what I'm doing, it's not where I'm at, where I want to be at just yet, but it's a good step in the right direction.
So when you graduated with a journalism major, you had a lot of good experience on that. In a perfect world, what part of the sports media would you love to do? Where do you see yourself? If I had to fast forward 5-10 years, do you see yourself behind the desk at ESPN? What's kind of your vision?
I see two paths that I would love to take. One of them is, like you said, behind the desk at an ESPN or an NBC Sports Boston. Being a sports, talk show host or a sports anchor in a sense, and really, being involved with that. And the other area I think is, and I think it's a more realistic one, and I think it's also one that more people should explore, is working behind the scenes as, a producer type. That's the person who makes the rundowns for the shows or is going out and filming the content for the shows and putting together the show so they can make the best product possible. And I think for me, that's the area that's most realistic and an area I would love to explore personally.
What drives you, Sam? When I look at you, and again, not to criticize your age group, but your work ethic is second to none. I even see you, I look out my window from my office and you're running, and you're even going intensely running down Johnson Street. You seem extremely driven to keep moving forward. I don't think you're a guy that takes a lot of downtime and probably gets bored with hanging around the house. What drives you?
Just the ability that I can't sit down on my butt all day and watch TV. I need to be out there and I need to be constantly doing something. And I think that's good for the industry that I work in and want to get into more, is that, the go-getters are the ones that ultimately get the big piece of the pie. And I think for me, going out there, covering sports, going out for runs and stuff like that really has motivated me to, ultimately want the job that I want. So just the inability to do nothing, I think, is a great motivator for me, and that's what's kept me going.
And I love your hunger. So I wanted to get into a question. So being here as long as I've been here, I can't tell you how many kids have actually said to me, I want to work in the sports field. I want to be in the media. I want to be a broadcaster. I want to be an interviewer, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of them, quite frankly, don't go in that direction. How hard is it to break into your field? And what would be your maybe suggestions to some kids on terms of, what you need to do to possibly break in? You mentioned a little bit, sometimes it's who you know and you need that break, which we all know that in any profession. But how hard is it to break into the sports media field?
It's incredibly hard, and I don't mean to say this as a deterrent, but you got to be prepared for some rejection before you ultimately enter the industry. It took me 5 months or so before I was able to get my first job in the sports industry. And it is kind of like Greek life in college. It is more of a who you know here, and you have to impress some people before you're widely accepted as someone who's in the industry. And it really is tough, and it took me a while. But I think if you have that work ethic, that you want to be the best that you can, it helps. I also think trying anything and everything is great too, and having more on your resume is better than having one specific thing. And it took me a while because for the longest time I only had college radio as my experience, and then I actually got my job at NBC Sports Boston because I volunteered at NACAM and really got involved with that. So, and also just to be confident too. It takes a lot of guts and courage to approach someone and ask for help, or in that sense. And I think you kind of have to be willing to do that. You have to step outside of your comfort zone, and when you do that, you have a better chance of landing a job in the media, sports industry in general, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I got to be honest with you, Sam, not kissing up or anything, but I have no doubt that you're going to be very successful because of what I see is this unbridled work ethic and this resiliency to beat the odds. And I'm hoping at some point in time, as you continue to grow, that maybe I can have you in to talk to some young Sam Murrays and kind of hear a lot of the things that you're saying right now of what it might take to get that. Let's talk about NA for a second. How did North Andover in general help develop Sam Murray into who he is right now?
So I think I mentioned this already, but I feel as though for what I want to do in the industry I work in, I think sports here is really ingrained early on, and I think that's fantastic because sports not only encourage competition, but they encourage a sense of community in a sense, and really want to form bonds and relationships over the years. And I think that's been a help with pointing me in the right direction in a sense like that, as sports is so important. And I also think there's a lot of resources available too. For example, I was a big fan of the youth center here growing up, and I think that's important for obviously establishing more of a sense of community. I think we have one of the best high schools in the state in terms of education. I think the teachers there are great. I think the administration there is great. And I think that helped me, really get a sense of drive and success in a general, because, the better education resources you have, the more successful you'll be, in my opinion. And I think that really helped me too, is that we have such a great school system here in North Andover. And in general, just the relationships I've made with adults, kids, friends here have, from an early age have been great. And it really has shaped me into the person I am today.
And besides spending 4 years of college down in Kingston, you've lived here pretty much your whole life. And you did say that you're going to be branching out and moving out to Medford. What's it going to be like for Sam Murray leaving North Andover? It's
going to be tough, and I'm not used to it. And again, I lived about 4 years down in Kingston in college, but I was making weekend trips home. I was visiting friends. So, when I'm out of town really for the first time ever in my life, it's going to be an adjustment. I'm going to miss seeing the people around here. I'm going to miss going on runs and running into people and stuff like that, or going to the convenience store, running into people, going to J&M downtown, seeing people. So it's going to be an adjustment, but I'm ready, because everyone has to leave the nest eventually. And whether you return to the nest or not, that's up to you. And one day I think I would like to return here. But for now, I got to start a new journey, and that is leaving North Andover, just for who knows?
Well said. Will you continue doing work for NACAM, or are you going to move on from that too?
I would like to, but I don't know what my career is going to be like in however many months it is from now when sports start back up. And it is unfortunate the MIAA canceled spring sports, but I understand it. It's for the health and the safety of everyone. It's unfortunate that seniors aren't going to, have that last chance to be there with their teammates, their coaches, and family cheering them on. But I think I would like to continue to do it. It's just we'll see where I am in a couple months.
Sure, and we wish you the best of luck with that. I'm hoping that if you do have to cut back or even leave NACAM, that there is someone that can pick up what you've done, because it has been phenomenal the last year and a half what you've done, and we need to continue building on that. Let me ask you, behind the mic, what broadcaster do you either relate to the most, or you kind of model yourself after? Is there anyone that kind of has a little bit of a mentor behind the mic?
Well, definitely the people at NACAM have been great. Bill Robert in particular, he also does sports with me. He's a big hockey guy. He does a lot of the hockey broadcasts and stuff. He's been great, kind of teaching me the ropes from day one, really being a mentor in that sense. And now working with him and being a colleague instead of a student has been great. And obviously Brian Frazier, Susan Martin, and Ray Da Silva down there have been great. And in terms of, I think some coaches have taken me under their wing too, and really have helped me get that first sense. John Zubzinski has been great. He is really the first coach I built a relationship with, and he really has been modeled after that. And Paul Tangwis, the basketball coach, has been great too. He actually approached me and said what great coverage I was doing when I had never met him before.
Right.
But when I talked to him, it was like he had known me for many years in terms of that sense. He's been great.
What about on the national media? So when you sit around yourself and watch a hockey game or a basketball game, baseball game, football game, and you listen to these voices, whether it's Jim Nantz or anybody else, who do you kind of like their style and maybe even model yourself a little after?
So I was a big fan of Vern Lundquist, the CBS guy, and I actually got to meet him in Pittsburgh, so that was kind of like a starstruck moment in terms of that. I really like his model. I think it's kind of basic, but Al Michaels is a great inspiration. I think he is excellent at what he does, and to kind of model myself after him is good. And in terms of radio, I think radio was my first sports passion, and who knows, maybe I can explore that later. But Michael Felger really is a person I would like to model my career after, because I think he's driven, and I think he's the best at what he does, and he takes no crap.
Yeah.
So he's been great too. But at the national and local level, those three really have been probably my favorite growing up and watching them and seeing what they do.
North Andover High School, one last question about the high school. When you look back at your 4 years there, who was your favorite teacher and why?
So my favorite teacher, I have a couple. Well, I never took a class with him, but Mr. Van Horn was great, and he was a football coach of mine, but he was awesome. He helped me out a lot, so he was good. And Mrs. Fry was also my favorite teacher personally. She taught AP Gov. She is excellent, and she was really nice to me, helped me out a lot. And it's good to see her son have such success at Penn State, and he's probably going to get drafted next year.
Absolutely.
I think.
Pat's amazing.
So good for him, and yeah, she was excellent.
Awesome. All right, we're going to do a little thing with you, the lightning round, okay? Would like you to answer as quick as you pod, not to really give you much time to think about. But obviously the rage, Jordan or LeBron?
I got to go Jordan, and especially this documentary is going to prove why I think he's the greatest of all time, and his competitiveness will never be matched again.
I agree with you. Belichick or Brady?
So this is tough, but I'm going to say Belichick because I think both of them need each other, but I think at the end of the day, Belichick is the reason why the Patriots have been so successful because of the way that he's outcoached everyone in the NFL.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Favorite sport for Sam to cover?
I'm biased towards football. It's got to be football. I think that's the best sport, in my opinion, and covering it is my favorite too because it's just nonstop action.
We talked a little bit about this, but dream job?
I think either being a sports anchor, sports talk show host, or being the producer for the #1 rated show in whatever market I'm in. I think that's my dream job.
Awesome. Favorite high school sports memory for you?
It has to be, and I wasn't playing in this, but it was in 2013 when North Andover welcomed the #1 ranked Central Catholic Red Raiders and upset them in great fashion. And it was good to see my friends Kyle White and Brendan Miller end up doing that. That was probably my favorite memory.
Yeah, that was a great memory. Favorite college sports memory for you personally?
So not in college. It was when UConn won the 2011 national championship because I loved Kemba Walker, and also I won my bracket that year thanks to that pick. And in college, it was when I traveled to Pittsburgh and I got to see URI win the Atlantic 10 Conference Championship over VCU. That was my favorite sports memory covering, at least.
Nice. And last one, you need to be Nostradamus on this. Who would have won the NCAA basketball tournament this year?
Maybe it's because I'm biased and I watched them kick the crap out of URI, but the Dayton Flyers and Obi Toppin. He was the best player in college, and I think that in college sports, particularly in basketball, you need that one good player to carry you, and that would have been Obi Toppin and the Dayton Flyers.
Now, I didn't know you were going to say that, but Dayton was my squad. Dayton and Kansas were my two squads that would face off in the final, hopefully. But, yeah, Dayton, if you didn't get to see Dayton this year, you missed a really entertaining basketball team. And I just wish people could have saw them on national television a little bit more, but that's great. All right, let's talk a little bit about that friend group of yours. Obviously, I love talking about, old friends, and I remember this when you were in middle school through high school. Who's the Sam Murray North Andover friend group?
So I have a pretty big squad, and I think that's because a lot of people like me. But it's Brendan Miller, Kyle White, Stephen Borzi, Louis Farisi, Cam Hall, and then we have like another subgroup, and they're really good friends of mine. But it's Casey Walsh, Evan Guild, and Colin Couillard. I think that's my squad, and I'm happy that throughout all the years we've still remained as close as we are and still are great friends.
Were you participating in that friend group's notorious basketball games down at the Reynolds Playground at all?
A little bit, but they're too good for me. Especially Brendan and Kyle. They're two of the best players I've ever seen. So it's not as fun playing with them, but they're excellent to watch. I enjoy watching them.
Well, I know a lot of your friend group, and it's a really good group of kids. And I told you earlier, I had Brendan and Kyle on, along with Kyle's girlfriend last year for a podcast, and they were raving about you and who you are and what you become, and I definitely have to agree. We have to wrap up right now, but I'm going to give you what we call the final word. Initially, I think you kind of answered my initial final word question around breaking into sports, but what would you want to say to young kids or even parents in this town about the path that you've chosen, and if somebody was interested, what do they got to do?
I think for media, it's always going to be there, whether that's on TV or more recently multimedia. So there's always going to be a need for that. And if you ever have an inkling that you want to do that, I think you should follow it. And obviously, it's a tough industry to break into, as I've mentioned, and as it's evidenced just in general. But I think being confident and not being afraid to approach people is an important skill. I think having the drive to want to, be the best that you are and work hard, I think is another important skill. And trying everything and anything you can, whether that's in middle school and high school or whether that's in college with the different organizations. I think following those three things, and above all else, just wanting to be the very best that you can is the best advice I can give to people, because that's what I did. And I'm not at the peak just yet, but if I continue what I'm doing, then I think I will be at the peak. And that's the advice I give the kids, is just try hard, try everything and anything, and just be confident and be approachable too.
Some great advice there. Sam, I'm not saying this because you're here. I've been actually watching you the last 18 months you've been here, and I actually feel I got a good read on potential with people, and I really believe you are going to be successful. I think your work with NACAM and NBCTV is only the start of a great career, and I hope you get to reach all of your goals and your dreams. And I want you, when you become the next Vern Lundquist, that you don't forget us here at the Youth Center, and maybe come back and mentor some of our young kids who would like to break into that. So
Be happy to.
This wraps up our podcast. I want to thank you again, Sam, for coming on the Youth Center podcast.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. It was great.
And you guys should always check, when we get back to a little bit of normalcy here, check out Sam. And right now you can check out on YouTube and NATV. Check out all of his great work he's done, which has been outstanding. So again, thanks for attending today's podcast. And as we finish every podcast, we always say too much passion is never enough passion.